Welcome to Daisy Education, formerly Reading Solution UK's fourth annual International Reading Conference. My name is Basit Siddiqui, and I'm honoured to once again be hosting this conference. As a passionate educator and lifelong learner, I know that I and everyone attending will get so much from this session and the conference as a whole. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of Daisy Education, they are an edtech company that provide opportunities for students to discover and develop a love of learning through their personalized online programs, Dreambox Reading Plus and Dreambox Maths. But they also love to support teaching and learning even further by hosting free, accessible CPD events to educators worldwide. This conference is a perfect example of that. We're super excited that you've all joined us for Michael Rosen, one of Britain's best-loved writers and performance poets, for his session, Fostering a Poetry-Friendly Classroom that Celebrates Reading for Pleasure. So, without further ado, Michael, I'm going to hand over to yourself. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Basit. It's wonderful to be here. And I'm going to talk about poetry and reading for pleasure and that sort of thing. And the best place to start when talking about poetry is actually with a poem or two. So look, I think I was going to start with this one, which I called my introduction song. And if you want to jig along with it, if you want to tap your feet or anything, it goes like this. I'm going to use my feet today. I don't know who I'll meet today. I'm going to keep the beat today. I'm going to use my feet today. I'm going to use my eyes today. Look out for the lies today. Try to be wise today. I'm going to use my eyes today. I'm going to use my ears today. I'm going to have no fears today. Never mind the tears today. I'm going to use my ears today. I'm going to use my mind today. Leave bad things behind today. See what I can find today. I'm going to use my mind today. I'm going to use what I got today. How and where and what today. I'm going to use the lot today. I'm going to use what I've got today. Yeah, little introduction song just to get us going. And one more. I was out with some children by the River Thames in London here, and we were walking along and we came to a railway bridge. You may know that there's a railway bridge, several railway bridges that go over the Thames, and you'll know there's a kind of rule or law, is it, that children seem to think, or it just somehow happens by magic, that when the train goes over, the children all start going, wow, together. I don't know how they know that that's what you do when a train goes over. You just all scream. Maybe it's written in some sacred text or something. Anyway, I was standing there with them and I thought, well, maybe there's something else you could do other than scream. Maybe if you could put your hands on the brick wall that holds up the bridge, you could actually feel the train. So you could see and hear it, assuming you've got sight and hearing, and you could put your hands on the bridge and you could feel the train, feel the rhythm of the train. As I said that, and this is sometimes people say to me, how do poems start? And I'll be talking about this because it's a bit of a mystery where they start from, particularly when we're trying to encourage children where to start, how to start. And you have to be out looking for it, a bit like the way we look at trees and wonder what trees are doing, or if we go bird spotting or anything like that. Or even collecting car numbers, as my brother used to do when I was a boy. Well, we poets are people who collect words and phrases. Sometimes more important to collect a phrase than a word. And a phrase is, after all, it's just a posh word to say more than one word, right? So if I say Michael Rosen, that's a phrase. If I say I'm sitting here, that's a phrase, all right? So I heard that phrase. I heard me say, put your hands on the bridge and you can feel the rhythm of the train. As I heard that, I thought, oh, I could begin a poem like that. So that's one of the things we can do as teachers and educators is collect up things that people say as starting points. You can have a wall in your room. Instead of those funny wow word walls that I sometimes see, you could have a thing where you could make it like a sort of scrapbook of words and phrases that people have said or you found in books, and use them as trigger points, ways of starting. Could be stories, could be poems. So there it was. If you put your hands on the bridge, you could feel the rhythm of the train, maybe. And the moment I thought of that, I thought of Benjamin Zephaniah, the late great poet Benjamin Zephaniah, a hero of mine. And I was once interviewing him on the radio. And the producer said to me in my earphones, please ask Benjamin where he writes his poems. So I had my earphones on and I said to Benjamin, where do you write your poems? And he said, how do you mean write? I don't write my poems. What? What do you mean you don't write your poems? I thought. It's a strange thing. What does he do? Does he get someone else to write them? He said, no. What I mean is I make up my poems in my head when I go for a jog, when I go running. I make them up in my head. Do you? Yes, he said. And that way, when I get to the end of the run, get to the end of the jog, I know the poem off by heart. I thought, wow, that's amazing. Could I do anything like that? So here am I with my hand on the wall, feeling the rhythm of the train. I'm getting all the children to join in. We're all standing there, and I'm thinking of Benjamin Zephaniah. So I set myself the Benjamin Zephaniah challenge. Could I make up a poem in my head? And with some of your older children, you could try this just as an experiment. Can you make up a poem in your head? All right. A lot of artists do that, rappers in particular, and freestylers and all those sorts of people. And there's Benjamin telling me he could do that. Could I make up a poem in my head on my way home? I won't actually go for a run. I won't actually go for a jog. That's a surprise, isn't it? No, what I'll do is get on the tube. That's the London Underground. For those of you who don't know, that's what we call it, the tube. I always see it spelt CHUBE, the tube. Well, I get on the tube and see if I can make up a poem that begins something to do with your hands on the bridge. Could I do that? And so I sat on the train, and there was me going, hands on the bridge, feel the rhythm of the train. Yeah, hands on the bridge. And then you could do, you could feel the rhythm. I don't know what that looked like. Imagine you're sitting on the train, there's a guy opposite you going, hands on the bridge, hula, hula, hula. Anyway, never mind that. At the end of my train journey on the tube, I had a poem, and I'm going to share it with you, and it goes like this. Hands on the bridge, feel the rhythm of the train. Hands on the window, feel the rhythm of the rain. Hands on your throat, feel the rhythm of your talk. Hands on your leg, feel the rhythm of your walk. Hands in the sea, feel the rhythm of the tide. Hands on your heart, feel the rhythm inside. Hands on the rhythm, feel the rhythm of the rhyme. Hands on your life, feel the rhythm of time. Again, hands on your life, feel the rhythm of time. So I had a poem. And that was in part thanks to Benjamin Zephaniah. So there's several little things that I can draw out of that. One was grabbing the moment, grabbing the situation, grabbing the phrase, grabbing that phrase that I said to myself. Yeah. And then another thing was being able to make up a poem in your head. It might not be the whole poem, but it might be just a bit of a poem. And we can help children do that. We can do that with like improv sessions in a class, but I might come back to that. And then also how once we've got a form or a shape, then it helps us. It helps us to go on making it, and we can be inspired by other writers. So I often think that the best place to start with poems is with another poem. It's not the only place, because I've just given you an example where it started from a phrase. But actually, you see, I said Benjamin Zephaniah. And when I said Benjamin Zephaniah to myself, his poems came into my head. Poems like People Need People, or Be Nice to Your Turkeys at Christmas, or I've been listening to the wrong radio. The kind of rhythms and shapes of Benjamin's poems came into my head, and that's how I ended up with Hands on the bridge, feel the rhythm of the train. That's a 4-beat line. Hands on the bridge, feel the rhythm of the train. Hands on the window, feel the rhythm of the rain. Do you see? It's got a 4-beat line. And not all Benjamin's poems do, but quite a few of them do. And so that helped me as well to write a poem. So there we are. So there's a little bit of an introduction, if you like, a long introduction. So now I'm going to ask the question, well, why bother with poetry? Now, a long time ago when I was at school, that wasn't even asked. What we did in school was English. And let's come back again. And English was poems, stories, and plays or bits of plays. And that's what we did. And we did it because that was the job of schools. Now, since all that time ago, a long time ago, I was at school in England, in London, in the 1950s. all that English stuff has gone through all sorts of mashups and changes, and it's been called literacy, and we split it up. At one point, it was being called reading, writing, speaking, listening, which I quite liked. That was a whole idea that it was all connected, but then that went away, and literacy, and we had the literacy hour, didn't we? Now we seem to be back with English, and we have things called GPS, grammar, punctuation, spelling, as if that's English. But anyway, I won't argue with all that. But somewhere in all that, and I'm talking about poetry today, is that poetry has got a bit lost. It's got marginalised and been put into units and stuck in a bit of a corner. And people like me think, well, that's a bit of a waste and a bit of a shame, because poetry actually can flow through the curriculum as a very powerful way in which children can take over and have language for themselves. You know, we often talk about how can children find a voice? How can children be comfortable with writing? I sometimes think learning how to write and learning how to perform and so on, it's a bit like getting the right glove to fit you, that it becomes yours. So just a few thoughts now on why bother with poetry, all right? Well, most poems, not all of them, and I've just demonstrated it, are great for saying out loud, particularly as it happens, ones written for children, or indeed ones for adults that have been selected for children. You may come across some of my collections. I put even some Shakespeare in. You know, there's this moment when Ariel, who's on the island in the play The Tempest, talks to somebody and tells him a very bad story that his father has been drowned. Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. That's what Ariel says. And you can hear the sound of it. It's got all those first sounds in it. Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. It's like a sort of an enchantment. It's almost like a spell, you know. And some of you will know double, double, toil and trouble, fire, burn, and cauldron bubble. And those are the witches in Macbeth. So there's plenty there from the past that we can introduce to children, and they're great for saying out loud. So these kinds of poems have a quality that I talk about that is potentially oral, okay? And I think we make a mistake when we separate out oral and the written. I'll keep repeating this as we do when we talk about poems. So if when poems are oral, we can do what I've done today, which is pass them over the airwaves between us. So it's a very social thing to do. All right. And we're always talking about how can we bring this class together? How can we show them that they can be helpful to each other? You know, sharing is caring and all that sort of thing. And we mean that. We mean that. All right. And so this is to do with speech and socialized form of speech. And so many of these poems have this quality about them. And I think of this, and I'm going to use this word, I've talked about hands on the bridge. I think of poetry as a crucial bridge, please borrow this word, steal it from me, between the oral and the written. That is this kind of poetry that we're talking about today. Other kinds of poetry, very private and very complicated. We're not talking about that. We're talking about poetry for children and poems that have been selected for children, the kind of poems that I've just done today. They're like a bridge between the spoken word and the written. So we might ask, well, why is that important? All right. Well, we know, don't we? The written word for many children, particularly the young ones, is a challenge. It's difficult. So even when some of it makes sense, there are other parts of it don't. So when we have a written form that's got feet, if you like, in both the oral and the written word, I always think the poems, like the ones I've just done, they enable children to move easily between the two. So 1 minute you can be oral, and the next minute you can look at the page. That one, the introduction song that I read to you, I don't know it all off by heart, so I was moving between oral and written. The other one, Hands on the Bridge, was oral, but it's in a book. You can find it in a book. And I often say about my performances when I go into schools or my videos, you can find those poems in a book. And after all, part of our job is teaching literacy. So one way to teach literacy is to have poems, have them on the tip of your tongue, know parts of them in the oral world, and then find them in a book and relate the two. Yeah. So I think poems are a great way for children to learn how to read, to keep reading, and reading for meaning. All right. So this is a crucial thing. Somewhere along the line in education, we seem to have separated out reading and reading for meaning. I don't understand that, to be honest. For me, reading means reading for meaning. And the great thing about this kind of oral poetry that I've already given you an example of, all right, is that you get the meaning and you're getting it when you read it on the page, when you hear it, and in the two ways together. Yeah. And another thing about poetry is that it's full of sequences that are memorable. In fact, the poet W.H. Auden once called poetry memorable speech. Please steal that phrase as well for today. Memorable speech. So when I'm writing, that's actually what I'm aiming to do. When I write a little poem, down behind the dustbin, I met a dog called Jim. He didn't know me, and I didn't know Dave. No, that's wrong. Do that again. Down behind the dustbin, I met a dog called Jim. He didn't know me, and I didn't know him. And you know, I was in a school once, and a boy shouted out, "Well, how did you know his name was Jim then?" Yeah. I couldn't answer that question. That was a difficult one. Anyway, what am I saying here? I'm saying that poems are made up of memorable sequences. W.H. Auden said memorable speech. I'm just nuancing that slightly and saying memorable sequences. Every single one of you listening could say a bit of a line from a song. Every one of you. You know, I'm not going to even suggest what it is. I have my favourites, you have your favourites, whoever they are. You've got lines in your head, phrases. That's because they're memorable. Now, with a song, you've got the advantage of the tune. Yes, I don't know, maybe some of you know a phrase for an ABBA song. I'll just pluck ABBA out of the pile just for a moment. And there's a bit of a tune that goes with it, obviously, because they're very clever tunesmiths. But actually, poetry, when you introduce it to a class, like that, Hands on the Bridge or something like that, then there's a phrase or a sequence that is memorable. And that means that what we're doing, in very crude terms, we're giving children language when we do that. When we pass over these sequences to the children, they stick in your brain. I can remember, for example, when I studied French. All right, so that's an additional language for me, MFL as we now call it in secondary schools, modern foreign language, an MFL, and we were taught poems and songs. So I can speak French, but I got in my head, Maître Corbeau sur l'arbre perché tenait en son bec un fromage. It stuck in my mind. Now that's what we want with our children, isn't it? We want language to stick in their mind. Now they've got their own language and languages. You know, many of the children I meet are bilingual, all right? But we want this English stuff that we're doing, that I'm speaking now, for phrases, memorable phrases to stick in their mind. Poetry is one of the ways that we can do that because they stick in the children's minds, yeah? So there's another reason, if you like, when we're saying why poetry, yeah? All right? And, you know, poetry, when I say it's but reading for meaning, it's because it contains thoughts, ideas, feelings, and philosophy. Yes, now that's all very grand. But every poem, go back to my Hands on the Bridge poem, hiding behind that is a thought. Now, I'm not going to do a GCSE or A-level thing on you. I'm just going to say every one of those little bits of that poem was about a rhythm, a different place you could find the rhythm. There was the bridge, there was your speech, there was your walking, there was the sea, there was your heart, there was the rhythm of the poem, and there was the rhythm of life. So as I just zipped through it and performed it, in actual fact, there is could use the word message if you like, but it's like a thought, which is that we are connected. We are human beings. We have speech. We have life. There's only, I believe firmly, there's only one race, the human race. That's what I firmly believe. So hiding behind that poem, again, like Benjamin, who spoke like this, didn't he? Like Benjamin, I wanted to say something. And what I was saying was that we are connected. There's all sorts of ways that make us different. You could say, oh, well, him, he's a this, she's a that. they're over there, they're this, they're that. But in actual fact, we're all human beings. Yeah. And in actual fact, if you want to, you could make it more holistic than that and include animals and all of life. But from human being point of view, that's what I was saying. With the introduction poem, again, there were ideas in that. That's to say, we have faculties. Perhaps I should have been a bit more careful about saying some people might not have all those faculties. I know that only too well since I lost my eye and my ear from COVID. But anyway, we have our faculties, and it's nice to think, and when a day starts, we can use those different things. We can use our eyes, our ears, our mind, and we can use whatever we've got. That was what I meant in the last verse. We can use whatever we've got to, boom, get going. So behind every poem, even silly little nonsense poems like my Down Behind the Dustbin, there's an idea and a thought. And of course, again, mentioning Benjamin and mentioning some of my poems, all right, is that we also carry culture with us. And I don't mean culture with a great big C, meaning, heavy, dead white old men culture necessarily, though I've got nothing against that, all right? But when we speak and when we do that, we express ourselves. That's what I mean by culture. So again, we're interested in culture in schools. We're interested in many cultures and bringing ourselves together and then looking at what we've got in different ways. And poetry is a great carrier of culture as well, of what it is and who we are. I do a little poem that goes that when I was at home, my mother didn't say, "Don't complain, don't moan." She said, "Don't kvetch." It's another language, isn't it? My mum spoke a language called Yiddish that some Jewish people can speak. And then when she said, "Don't slurp," she didn't say, "Don't slurp your soup." She said, "Don't hup." And then she said, "Don't burp." She didn't say, "Don't burp." She said, "Don't greps." And then she never said, "Don't fart." She would say, "Don't fots." And then when I got wrinkles in my socks, she'd say, "Take the bagels out of your socks." So I used to put all that together. And I go, "Don't kvetch, don't hoop, don't greps, don't fots. Take the bagels out of your socks." So what I've done there is I've had some fun with the fact that I came from a home where these words all intermingled. And then I've put that into a poem, and of course that's saying something about culture. So I talked about ideas and thoughts, how poems are carriers of these things, but of course they can reflect our culture. And so in classrooms, there are lots and lots of poets speaking in lots and lots of different ways and tones and voices. I've mentioned Benjamin, who had one foot in the Caribbean and the other foot in Birmingham. And he expressed that through his poems. And here's me. I'll do it one more time. You can join in if you like. So my mother doesn't, she says, well, you remember what she says? She says, "Don't kvetch, don't hoop, don't greps, don't fots. Take the bagels out of your socks." Yeah, in actual fact, she didn't say bagels. In the olden days, we used to say bygles. But anyway, I'll leave that. Let bygones be bygones. Let bygones be bygones. So there's some thoughts about why poetry, all right? Sometimes, so I put those thoughts in this little booklet. Oh, you can't see it. It's called Poetry and Stories for Primary and Lower Secondary Schools that you can get through my website. I'll say that again. Poetry and Stories for Primary and Lower Secondary Schools, all right? And I've put those thoughts about why poetry, because sometimes, you will find you have to justify why you're doing poetry. Yes. And so people say, well, how do we get children to write poems? How do we get them to enjoy poems and so on? And I always say that the key actually is to create what I call a poetry-friendly classroom. Yes, a poetry-friendly classroom. So how do we do that? What kinds of things can we do to create a poetry-friendly classroom? Yeah. And that's really an attitude to how you organize. I'm just trying to find where I scribbled that down. But anyway, I'll just ad lib. So a poetry-friendly classroom, what is it? It's a place where poems, if you like, are safe, are welcome. It's a warm place for poems to be. So when I was a kid, we didn't have a poetry-friendly classroom. Poems seemed to be tidied away in rather dull-looking books. Nowadays, poetry books are very exciting to look at. They're full of lovely pictures of one sort or another. I've worked with all sorts of Oh no, you can't see that. All sorts of lovely illustrators. All right. So the first thing I say is get some poetry books into your classroom. So, you've got a classroom library of some sort or another. Make sure to have, I'd say, at least 10 poetry books in your classroom. Yeah, you can get them. They're very cheap. They're very cheap paperbacks. You can get them from secondhand bookshops as well. All right, but you can order new ones. All right. So the most important thing is get some poetry books into your classroom. Another thing you can do is to get the sound of poetry into your classroom. Now, how can you do that? Well, is the National Poetry Archive. The National Poetry Archive has hundreds of recordings of us poets reading our poems. So that way you get in touch with the oral quality of poetry. So you can set that up, you can play it, you can have a session where you hear poets, and then you, in your lesson prep time, you can find us poets. There's videos of us performing our poems. So some of you will know I've got a YouTube site which is called Kids, Poems and Stories with Michael Rosen. And there are 500 videos, 500 videos up there. Some people know Chocolate Cake, and others know that one that goes, we sit down to eat, and the potato's a bit hot. So I only put a little bit on my fork and I blow till it's cool, just cool, into the mouth. Oh, nice. And there's my brother, he's doing the same. Till it's cool, just cool, into the mouth. Oh, nice. And there's my mum, she's doing the same. Till it's cool, just cool, into the mouth. Oh, nice. But my dad, what does he do? He stuffs a great big chunk of potato into his mouth, and that really does it. His eyes pop out. He blows, he puffs, he yells. His head bobs up and down. He even, sorry about this, spits bits of potato onto the plate. And then he turns to us and he says, watch out, everybody, the potato's really hot. Well, we knew that, didn't we? Yeah, did we know it was hot? Yes. Did he know it was hot? No. And as I say to the children, that was the day I found out that my dad does not know everything. Okay, so look, there's another example. All right, I was going to say that's there's a video of that, as people maybe know. All right, so you find these videos. Benjamin Zephaniah I've mentioned, but any poet that you find in a book or whatever, all right, chances are there'll be videos or ways their poems are presented on video, and you can play those into the room. Just to go back to what I was saying about how poems carry ideas. So there's a sort of a silly poem. It's a domestic poem, if you like, about the way families are and the way we do different things and laugh at each other or look at each other and wonder why we're doing it. Well, as I point out to children, sometimes dads are in this sort of position in a house as if they're sort of the fount of all wisdom. All right. And so it was a bit like that in my family. We always turned to my dad and sort of, what's the name of this and where do we go for that? It was somehow or other. But then he had these funny foibles that we used to love laughing at. So in a way, what's hiding behind that poem is a little bit of that thing of what comedians call kicking up, that we're kicking up to the person who's a little bit in control in the house and having a bit of a laugh that he doesn't know that the potato's hot and then thinks, watch out, everybody, the potato's really hot. That's the gag, isn't it, in the poem? All right. So I'm talking about bringing orality of poetry into the classroom. And I'm saying find recordings, find audio and video, but of course, make audio and video with the children. All right. There's a great emphasis in schools on comprehension. Yes, I understand that. But of course, if you take a poem and record it in any way, audio or video, you are dealing with the meaning of the poem. So if you put children in pairs or threes, all right, pairs is quite often the best. Get them to work out how to perform a poem, all right? You don't have to instruct them. You just say, here's a poem, all right? and then share it, and then talk about the way we perform it, then just the same as an actor doing a performance in a show, in a play, has to make sure they're saying it in order to convey the meaning, then that's the same with the children. So we don't have to push them hard. We just say, well, do you think what the feeling is in that poem? Is that loud? Is that quiet? Is that sad? Is that happy? You can have some key words for yourselves as a sort of checklist for children to look at when they're performing a poem. Do they need a pause? Do they need to go very, very quiet and just whisper something? Is there anybody there? Said the traveller, knocking on the moonlit door. So sometimes I've seen that performed in schools and people go, is there anybody there? Said the traveller, knocking on the moonlit door. Well, I would say, well, do you think the traveller is shouting at that point? Yeah, because he's knocking on the moonlit door. Is there anybody there? Said the traveller, knocking on the moonlit door. Then suddenly you're conveying meaning. You're discussing the meaning in the poem. And of course, that poem is about this lonely traveller and the sound of his voice echoing and no reply comes back. And this slightly spooky idea of the listeners. Look out for that one. It's called The Listeners by Walter de la Mare. All right, it's a great poem to perform. I performed it when I was at school. That's why I mentioned that one. All right, so there we are. We're beginning to create some situations in the class. Now, I said there about the idea of children getting in pairs. Now, what if, and I've seen this, what if you've got your little pile of poetry books, let's say in your lesson preparation time, you photocopy off some other poems, and you say to the class, I tell you what we're going to do today, we're going to have, maybe call it whatever you want, but a poetry slam, a poetry cabaret, a spoken word festival, you call it whatever you want, all right? But basically, it's going to be the children performing some poems. So call it something zippy and zoomy, however you want to call it, all right? And say that what I'm going to do is I'm going to dish out these poetry books, dish out these photocopied sheets. You can choose any poem you like, all right? And divide into pairs and think up any way you like to perform it. And then we'll come back in 10 minutes' time. All right, so off they go in their pairs. They can stand up, they can move around. You can suggest to them they can use anything they want. They can use their hands, their arms, their face. You can use me as an example. Somebody, I always waving my hands about, look, I'm doing it now. All right. Sometimes you move with the rhythm, don't you? Hands on the bridge, feel the, hands on the bridge. Or we're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. Use your hands, use your body. In between that, when I do that one, don't I go chum, 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 chum. So that use my mouth as an instrument. Some of the children know how to beatbox. So I do a kind of rap that goes, you may think I'm happy, you may think I'm sad, you may think I'm crazy, you may think I'm mad, but hang on to your seats and listen right here. I'm going to tell you something that'll burn your ear. A hip hop, hap. I'm giving you all the Michael Rosen rap, 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 rap. Well, anyway, that one, I won't do the whole poem. All right, you can do beatbox to that. All right, and then you can encourage children to do that. Another nice trick you can do, maybe a long, long time ago, you may have seen that Bob Dylan video in black and white. It's called Subterranean Homesick Blues. And what he did was pick out key words. Maggie's in the basement, mixing up the medicine. All right, is you could do mixing, and you could do medicine, or down behind the dustbin, and you write them out on big cards, and then you hold them up while you're doing the poem. Yeah? And that's quite fun. One holds up the big words, the key words, and the other one does the poem. So you can suggest these things or not. That's up to you. All right. But to start off with, what we want to do is to encourage the children to do this. So what you do, they've divided off into pairs. All right. And then the first time, you're the MC. And you'd set it all up. Maybe you even have a little microphone in the class. All right. And you say, welcome to class three poetry slam. Get them all clapping. And first up we have, and then whoever was prepared to do it, they can stand up. And you can also tell them that if they don't want to perform the poem the first time round, they could even mime a poem. You could even just take a key bit from Chocolate Cake, my chocolate cake poem, and all they need to do is go, They don't have to do the whole poem. So you encourage children to find little bits of performing ways of doing it. All right, don't put them under too much pressure because they then get fed up. All right. And you go around the class, and then the deal now, very, very important, what I always call the RESPECT deal. That's a quote. Some of you will know that comes from a certain song by a certain singer called Aretha. All right. RESPECT. All right. Which is that in following the performance bit, is that and in the performance, while people are performing, we all respect each other's performances. So what we do now after the show is we say to each other, we say, what did we like about the other people's performances, all right, that you'd like to have a go at next time? Yes? So in other words, you use the performance as a platform and a construction to do more, because you're going to do this again next week. All right, the poetry slam happens next week. Okay, so now people start saying, oh, I love that bit where he stood up and down, sat down again, because it was a funny little poem about standing up and sitting down. Or somebody liked the fact that, let's say they did my gestures of hands on the bridge and did the rain and things like that. So that people are building up a repertoire, another important word here, a repertoire, that means like a catalogue of gestures and ways of performing. So think of yourself as building ways of performing by discovering and sharing it. Sometimes you could encourage the children so that if there's a chorus in a poem, all right, that you go solo with these two and you invite people to join in. So you can model that, you see. So in my poem, go back to it, the introduction song. In fact, we can do it now. All right, you remember, you said, I'm going to use my feet today. So that line we know is going to be repeated. So we could go solo, I'm going to use my feet today. The other child could say, I don't know who I'll meet today. Back to the first child, I'm going to keep the beat today. And then invite the whole class to say, I'm going to use my feet today, because you've already heard it. And that's one of the tricks, like sea shanties and all call and response and songs that have choruses. You hear it once and then you can do it again. So I tell you what, I'm going to do the next one. I know I can't hear you. You know what's the last line is going to be. I'm going to use my eyes today. Look out for the lies today. I'm going to be wise today. No, sorry. Start again. Didn't do that very well at all. Here we go. I'm going to use my eyes today. Look out for the lies today. Try to be wise today. Yes, it's I'm going to use my eyes today, isn't it? Because I gave you that line. So this is also about listening. And I say we used to talk about speaking and listening. All right. Somehow listening got lost in the curriculum. I don't know why, but anyway. All right. So this is about helping the children learn how to listen. Okay. One more, see whether you can do it. I'm going to use my eyes today. I'm going to have no, we did eyes. We're doing ears. I haven't got my glasses on. Here we go. I'm going to use my ears today. I'm going to have no fears today. Never mind the tears today. I'm going to use my... Exactly. You know how it goes. So you encourage children with all these. For some of you, a bit unfamiliar with this, but you think about a choir or you think about opera or about musicals. Just move what you know about all that stuff across to poetry. Yeah. So think about musicals, think about bands and how they sing together and step up to the microphone and do things. Think about musicals with gestures and stuff to go with the songs. All right. If you like opera, think about opera. Think about choirs, think about solos, duets, trios and choruses, and just move all that knowledge across and say you can do all that with poetry. Yeah. So that's another aspect. So now what I'm suggesting is you do this poetry slam thing and you do it maybe once a week. You just say when you've got a spare 20 minutes, something like that, you say, right, okay, let's do poetry slam. Quickly dish out the books, quickly choose it, children divide into pairs, and then we come back again and then we perform it. Yeah? So there's my poetry slam idea. Another idea. Okay. Maybe once a week, once a fortnight, maybe once a month, you decide what's best. You put up a poem on the wall. Okay? Just that. No questions, nothing at all. You just, maybe if you write it out yourself in your own writing so the children know that it's you that's put it up there and it's in a sense got your signature on it. Any poem you like. Could be a very difficult one, could be a very silly one, could be a very sad one. and you put it up on the wall. And you do that, I'd say once a week. But anyway, if that's too much, then once a fortnight. And you don't ask any questions, you just put it up and see what happens. So this is the poetry gallery idea. So I talked about poetry slam, which is the orality, all right? Now you can have a poetry gallery. So you can either do one poem, I would say one poem, some people say put up several, and then just leave it there. And some children look at it and some won't. Some children will come up to you and say, well, why did you put that one up? And you say, well, why do you think? Or you could say, I like it. Or it was a poem that I liked when I was a child. Or you could say, I just found it the other day and I thought it was nice. Whatever is the reason. If you trust the children, you could leave post-its. You could leave post-its next to the poem, and any thoughts they have, they can stick up next to the poem. So it could be, I like that word, or I like this, or that reminds me of this. And you can have some trigger questions. Listen to my trigger questions. Does it remind you of anything that's ever happened to you or ever happened to somebody you know? So that's a sort of, remind maybe is too hard a word for some of the young ones. So you might want to do make you think of something that's ever happened to you or to somebody you know. Does it make you, you might use the word trigger, that's up to you. Yeah? All right. So that's a reminding. You might say, another remind thing, does it make you think of any other poem, story, TV program, song, film? So that's what we call an intertextual question. Because all these poems that I'm talking about, they sit in a whole world of other texts. So the posh word for that is intertextuality. Please feel free to steal that. It's very, very important because actually a lot of the way we respond, the way we understand, is through our experience. That was the first question. Does it remind you of anything that ever happened to you? And through our experience of texts. That's what we do. So when I say to you, double, double, toil and trouble, that might make you think of witches, or it might make you think of double your money, or it can make you think of all sorts of things. They're all significant. So if you encourage the children to think of those two questions, does it remind you of anything that's ever happened to you? Does it remind you of any other text that you've ever come across? And you write those on post-its and put it round the poem, then that's a way of getting into the meaning of poems and to having a conversation, because this is so important about poetry and making it happen, or indeed any stories and stuff that you're working on in class. But here, because the poems, they're like little pictures, and there I'm talking about the poetry gallery, that comes from the Centre for Literacy and Primary Education, that idea of the poetry gallery, or the poetry portrait that I'm suggesting. You put the poem portrait, you put it up on the big one, just like you've got a painting on the wall, you put up a poem on the wall. Why not? This is education, this is words, this is literacy, that's what we're all about. Great, we've got a painting, let's put up a poem, and then change it. Just do it once a week, once a month, whatever it is. I'd say once a week, all right? And, you don't have to ask questions. You can maybe have a little circle time where you talk about the poem, particularly if it's got important ideas that have set some children thinking, worrying, wondering, intriguing them, all right? So there's another way in which you create this poetry-friendly classroom, if you like. So we've got books, we've got audio, we've got video. Now, one other thing, looking at my time here, all right, is a game that I talk about in relation to poems. Now, people say, this is all very well, but we have to do comprehension, we have to do technique, we have to talk about language and so on. Okay, listen to my game. It's called Secret Strings, and the children are poem detectives, all right? I've written about this in books and in my little books and so on. You can find it. I did a book called Why Poetry, and there's an explanation of secret strings in there. All right. But here we go with secret strings. So all you do, you say to the children, is that in poems, one bit of a poem is linked to another. And the way we can talk about that is a string. So if I say to you, down behind the dustbin, I met a dog called Jim. He didn't know me and I didn't know him. Well, one obvious string is from Jim to him. Yes, obviously. Yeah. So there's one, and that's what we call rhyme, as you know. But there's a sort of secret string, which is da dum da dum da dum, a dum da dum da da, da dum da dum da da, da dum da dum da da, what we call the rhythm. So you can show the children. So we can have rhyme, we can have rhythm, and see whether they can find the rhythm with the secret string. So the secret string there is the fact that the rhythm repeats. So poems are full of repetitions of all sorts of different ways. Yeah. Hand on the bridge, feel the rhythm of the train. Hand on the feel the rhythm. Oh, it's like Lego. You've got the same color bricks. Hand on the then it's a change of color. Feel the rhythm of the. So some of the Lego is the same color each time, and then it changes. So with secret strings, you draw a loop round the bit that is repeated, carry the secret string across to the next bit. So you sit them down. What you do is you put a poem on the floor, blown up quite big, with a great big piece of sugar paper sitting on a sugar paper, and then maybe in twos and threes, you get them putting loops round any bit that they look at, thinks linked to another. Now I've talked there about the sound, and of course I said down behind the dustbin. So hiding there is, in fact, an old principle that goes all the way back to Old English poetry like Beowulf, in which you bounce the alliteration from one bit of the line to the next. Down behind the dustbin, b, b. All right. Now, we sometimes do that stuff without even thinking about it because we have a very alliterative language in when we speak, probably in most languages, but definitely in English. All right. I remember as a kiddie, there used to be, we had a tin of biscuits and it said on it, Crawford's cream crackers, crisp and creamy. You see, we like that sort of sound, don't we? Down behind the dustbin, I met a dog called, yes, a bub, full fathom 5, thy father lies. Yeah, so there's some alliteration. But we also have secret strings of meaning. We have secret strings where the meaning is repeated. Useful little phrase for you, sometimes called the semantic field, sometimes called the lexical field. All right, posh words, you're probably not going to use them with the kids. All right, but what that does is draw attention to the fact that in poems and stories, we have different ways of talking about the same thing. So if you might have a poem that's got lots of different ways of talking about the darkness of the night, and they might be dark and gloomy and somber and things like that. So you encourage the children to find ways in which meaning is repeated in a poem. You might use that phrase. Lexical is a bit difficult, but semantic, they both are. Lexical means words, semantic means meaning. So field, the idea they come from the same thing. So you've looked for samenesses, similarities in meaning, or images, there's another word you can use, pictures is better, the way in which the pictures are repeated, all right? But also sometimes they're contrasted in opposites and contrasts. So we have similarities and contrasts. So you're getting the kids to hunt for similarities and contrasts, repetitions of any kind, repetitions in sound, repetitions in rhythm. But you don't say any of that stuff. You say, we are poem detectives and we're looking for secret strings. I promise you the children love doing this. It puts them in control. They look for the stuff. They go, look what I found, look what I found. If you like, you can write on the lines, you can say what it is, or you can have a commentary down the side or whatever. You can do it orally as well. You can, like I'm just doing now, you can say, oh, I've spotted another secret string. All right. And this opens up that whole world of stuff that we talk about, technique. If you want to give the stuff names, because you're teaching year 5s and 6s, 7s, 8s, of course, alliteration, rhythm, rhyme, meter, all these words, yeah, you can use all of them if you want, patterns of imagery and so on. Yes, you can use all those, but in actual fact, you start by investigating through my secret strings game. As I say, you can find it laid out with me looking at a Thomas Hardy poem in my book, Why Poetry, or you can experiment yourself. Find any poem you like. Oh, I did it also in a book called Rosen's Almanac. There's me looking at an Edness and Vincent Millay poem that way. But basically, just have some fun. Find any poem you like and see whether you can spot the secret strings and go beyond the sounds. Go into the patterns of meaning for yourself. patterns of imagery. Poets work very hard at creating these patterns of imagery. Indeed, as we mentioned, Shakespeare, he had patterns of imagery that ran through his whole plays. You can do it with Macbeth. So now I can see Bassett is coming. So he's not actually doing the wind-up sign, but we're getting to 10:50. So I hope what I've done is make you very enthusiastic about poetry and found some ways in which you can get the children interested and excited in poetry. Thank you very much, and let's see whether there's some questions coming up, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Michael, as always, absolutely incredible. I think the last comment that I saw was, "This is genius." The whole talk was genius. There were so many brilliant bits there. Now, I promised myself I wouldn't fanboy and just throw loads of praise at you, but I don't need to because so much love has come through. Thank you very much for so many useful tidbits throughout. There was a question asked right at the start about how to engage older students, but I think you've answered it throughout. It's just create that culture in so many different ways where poetry just becomes a part of the classroom environment and the school environment.
Yes, I mean, I was in a classroom in a secondary school just last week, and I could see that the students were looking at a poem, and I just popped my head round the door because I've been working with some others, you see, and they said, "Oh, it's Michael," and I said, "Yeah, we're doing poems, you see." And then there was a boy sitting at, a boy, it was a young man really, I think they were 15-year-olds, and this boy went, "Yeah, yeah," and it's rubbish, you see. And I said, "Oh, can you show me the poem, you see?" And I looked at the poem and I'd never seen it before. Never seen it at all. And I looked at it, and it was immediately, I could see it was on quite a touching theme. It was about somebody thinking that they might die tomorrow, and what would people think of them? And I then turned to him, and it was just literally spontaneous. I said, "If you think it's rubbish, why not have a go yourself and do better?" Okay? So this is a GCSE class. Now, I know GCSE classes, it's quite often the students have never had time to write because they got so busy getting all this critical stuff and they've got to get the critical language and blah, blah, blah. But his gut feeling was the poem was rubbish. That's fine. I would take that as the starting point and say, absolutely, if you think so, Darren, Bassett, if that's what you think, all right, have a go yourself. Look, I said to the students, I said, it's got quite a simple beat to it. I said you could imitate that. In fact, it's not far off a rap because rap, after all, is quite often based on quite old rhythms. Don't say that, but anyway, I said you could keep to that or you could just do it yourself. Just imagine you've heard that you're dying tomorrow. Now you write a poem about you dying tomorrow and what the people around you will think of you. And then I left the room. Now, there was a kind of, I think, I don't know whether that's perfect teaching or not, you know better than me. But in a way, I was trying to explode the idea that poetry is not over there, it's not on a pedestal. It's just like, I whistle a tune. I'm not a musician, but it doesn't stop me whistling in the bathroom, all right, because I think I want to remember that tune. And I do it. Well, poetry should be the same. You read it, you think, that's not very good. That's fine, good feeling. Okay, go away, see if I can do better. And then you can compare them. Did I do better? Well, that bit I think's better than hers. Yeah, but she actually got a point there. All right. So you use and bounce off the two. That's how I would answer that about older students.
100%. You just find that thread, and that's the beauty of teaching as well. You find what you can, whether it's a challenge, whether it's just to find a hobby. That's absolutely brilliant. So, like I said, I've been taking notes after notes of loads of brilliant, useful information. I think the thing that I wanted to wrap up with, and there's one brilliant thing that I wanted to wrap up with, but a question that I had was, you've got so many fantastic resources, and you touched upon it, saying that you can get them from the website. As we've got this audience here of giving you so much praise, can you remind everyone of the website itself where we can grab all of the fantastic?
Okay. So I have my YouTube channel, which is called Kids Poems and Stories with Michael Rosen. My last seven videos are poetry workshops. Okay, my last seven. So if you use the filter and put recent or newest or whatever it's called, most recent, use the filter, you'll see my last seven and the next four as well. So there'll be 11 in all, and then I'm going to do some more, are poetry workshops. I'm speaking directly to the child, but it's up to you. You can take it and adapt it however you want. They're each about 5-6 minutes long. And I take a poem and talk about how you could write a poem like that. Yeah. I did a book called Why Poetry, published by Walker Books. That's a paperback that explores all sorts of different ways of writing poems, how I write poems, how you can do different activities to do with poems, much of what I'm saying today. All right. My website is called michaelrosen, all one word, .co.uk. Slightly misleadingly, one of the buttons at the top is called blog. If you click on blog, there's a whole archive of poetry writing ideas. Okay, so feel free to use that. Under books, they're all recent books. There's a set of booklets, and I'm just on this business of poetry. I'll just de-blur my background. Is this one, Poetry and Stories for Primary and Lower Secondary Schools. All right. And that is, if you go to books on my website, you can find that and some other booklets as well, like this one, Reading for Pleasure. I also did one called Writing for Pleasure. All right. And there's one based that a guy called Johnny Walker did, which is based on my videos, where how you can use my videos to write, and you'll be able to see that one. So it's Michael Rosen plus Johnny Walker, all right, because he's a teacher and teacher poet who goes around schools working with students, and he's used that. So those are some of my poetry resources that I'm offering to you teachers. Yes.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for your time and all of your links. Honestly, could talk to you forever. And as you can see, the praise is coming through. Right, I was going to finish on one thing, and I know we're super duper pressed on time, and I just wanted to read this out. So this is love for yourself, Michael. My son, Aiden, age 10, loves your YouTube channel. He memorized chocolate cake, including your improvisations. He recited it in year 5 once to his class as he practiced with your book. He has Asperger's and is usually very shy in groups, but he recited the whole poem from memory, blew everyone away, and received the class learning power certificate that week. That is the work that you do. Can't thank you enough, sir. I know we're absolutely pushed for time, but I just wanted to say a massive, massive thank you again, Michael. As you can see, there's so much love coming through. Thank you, sir.
Thank
So
you very much. Thank you, Bassett. Thank you, Daisy Education. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I hope that's been useful. Thank you.
it absolutely has. Thank you. From all of us at Daisy Education, thank you. And I hope you can join us for some other sessions, but take care. Thanks, everyone.